Welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin, and this is a custom video for Robin. He writes, Dear Austin, this is Robin from Germany. I am quite new to wristwatches. I owned the very first Apple Watch until today, but my brother was constantly bothering me about it. Until a couple of weeks ago, I did not understand what he was talking about. He is constantly flipping used and vintage Rolexes, and I never understood what he likes about them, as he is more the type for dress watches. Out of curiosity, I had a look on the Rolex website for the first time and was mind blown. I had no idea about any of the models' histories or about Rolex at all. I instantly fell in love with the 116900 Air King. And 2 weeks later, I purchased one from a private seller as a reward for my PhD. Congratulations on your PhD, Robin. From that day on, my Apple Watch was decommissioned and I started to read about other Rolex models and became a big fan of your YouTube channel. Thank you, Austin. Well, I'm glad you found me, Robin, and I'm glad you've come to appreciate mechanical wristwatches and you've arrived. You know, for a lot of non-watch people, these things don't make a lot of sense. They just use them to tell the time, and when they don't have one on their wrist, they just use their phones. But there are many dynamics to this hobby that make it really interesting. The history of these watches and the brands and the design aspect and the mechanics and the engineering and the shopping aspect and the collecting aspect and the identity of these watches, the conversations we have down to the politics on the retail market. It's all very interesting, and these watches last. And he's the second person this week who I've made a custom video for who's thrown away their Apple Watch in favor of a mechanical watch. And I think we're going to see more people do that because people get sick of cheap stuff and these cheap quartz watches and smart watches that just last a couple of years and that are only designed to last a couple of years. You know, they want something that will last their whole life. You can give to your heirs, and there are not many things like that in our lives these days. So I think mechanical watches are only going to become more desirable, more appreciated, and more popular. He continues, as I bought the watch without any bias, I later realized that the current Air King is not that popular among Rolex enthusiasts. I honestly do not understand why. Design-wise, it is still my favorite. What do you think about my current one-watch collection? Well, I think the Air King is a great watch to have, and it is a popular watch. Just try to buy one at an AD and see if you can. You can't. But comparatively speaking, in terms of the other professional models, it's more on the lower end. It would probably be like this ranking-wise: Daytona, Sky Dweller, GMT, Submariner, and then the other dive watches, the Deep Sea, James Cameron, Sea Dweller, and then the Yachtmaster would be about the same level as the non-rotating bezeled professional watches, the Explorer Milgauss, the Air King, and then a hair below would be the Oyster Perpetuals. Why is that? Well, one aspect is cost comes into it. I remember having a Rolex catalog as a kid and just noticing that the Air King was the cheapest. And look, if these are luxury watches, just by default, whatever's like the cheapest or cheaper is going to get the derision because that's how the luxury market is. But you know, these Air Kings and Oyster Perpetuals, I mean, they are just as legit as any of the other models. Now, as far as the Daytona and the Sky Dweller, I think it's the lack of availability that really drives the desire there. I think if Subs and Daytonas were equally available, I think that people would gravitate towards the Sub. It's more iconic, it's more usable, it's got more usable functions. But it's the fact that, you know, the desirability of the Daytona really drives a lot of people's desire for it. I mean, it's like a vicious circle. It's the hardest to get. It sells for the most on the pre-owned market. The markup is greatest and the premium is the greatest. And so to have one as sort of, a badge and an accomplishment, and you get a lot of bragging rights for it, and that drives a lot of people. But as far as the GMT and the sub, I mean, those are iconic designs, iconic watches. And so, that's it's got tough competition, the Air King, but it's a great watch, and I've only started to understand it recently, and I made a video, link in the description, to having my realization on the Air King. It's an incredibly legible watch, and makes a lot of sense when you look at it in that regard, and it makes a hell of a lot more sense than the Air Kings of the past, the 34 millimeter Air Kings that are questionable in terms of a pilot's watch, and a lot better options from other brands in terms of a bigger, more legible pilot's watch. And so I think the new Air King, while it's so different than the old Air Kings, the 14000s, those are great watches, but I think the new Air King makes a lot more sense. I think they sort of missed the mark on those previous Air Kings, but they are pretty cool. So he continues, I decided that I might go for a second watch in the near future. I love the Air King, but I am struggling wearing it all the time, and I would like something with more functionality to play around with. Yes, and he touches on something that I think I would feel if I had a Milgauss or an Explorer or an Air King or an OP. Those are very simple watches, time-only watches, and I would miss the date. There's a beauty and a simplicity to those watches that are worth enjoying, and I kind of want one of those watches to enjoy the purity there and the simplicity. But I think I would recommend him have a more complex piece function-wise, and so I think that makes a lot of sense going forward. And my ideal collection would be about 3 pieces, but I think 2 is fine. At least 2. Okay, 1's not quite enough. You need to be able to walk away from a piece and focus on other pieces. It gives you kind of a new appreciation for the pieces you already have. But collections become too big, and service costs can become expensive. So I think 3 is the perfect, but minimum 2 if you're a watch guy. 2 Rolexes to go back and forth with. You have your Rolex for when the other Rolex is at RSC, right? So I think this is a good move. For example, these are some things he's thinking about getting. I like the Explorer 2 and the GMT Master 2. Perfect choices, absolutely. And I think either could complement my Air King quite well. Yes, because you want a function-rich watch. I mean, the Sky Dweller, right? That would be really expensive on the secondhand market. You'll probably never find one at an AD, but that's a real function-rich watch. But the Explorer 2 and GMT are as well. You've got the date, you've got the second time zone, and if you're talking the GMT Master 2, you've got the rotating bezel that you can time things with. So the GMT is the real winner there. And if you could get one at an AD, that would be great, but you're going to be paying so much more for a ceramic GMT Master 2. That's if you want to go with the modern version, but you could always go with a pre-ceramic piece. And one good thing about the GMT is it would give you, if you were to get either the current BLNR or BLRO or a pre-ceramic 5-digit, you could get a Jubilee bracelet. It would give you a different bracelet. So ideally, if you want a modern piece, I would go for a BLRO or a BLRN. You'd have the Jubilee bracelet, you'd have the rotating bezel, the date, the extra time zone. It would be a perfect 2-piece collection. A couple pilot's watches, but the Explorer 2 would be good as well. But I gotta say, having that rotating bezel, it really changes the game. And the GMT is a much more iconic watch, and it's a more beautiful watch, if I may put my opinion out there. If you take a 40 millimeter Explorer 2 GMT Master 2, I just think the GMTs are so much more beautiful, and you can do the bezel thing and put in different colored bezels and your Coke bezel and your all black and your Pepsi, and then switch out the bracelets. So many different looks. Now that's of course if you're going pre-ceramic. If you're going modern, you can't do that. All right, but that would be my suggestion right there. All right, he continues. Which watch would you recommend as a great counterpart to the Air King? I am pretty much committed to Rolex, but not 100%. Maybe Omega or Tudor is an option as well. I wouldn't. I would go with one more Rolex piece. Get your 2 Rolexes or 3, and then I would start going for other brands. Definitely, I wouldn't get a Tudor next. Tudor is just, it just, they don't make you buzz like a Rolex, okay? I'm speaking from experience. I mean, this is a very function-rich watch, and I would almost recommend this, but it's on a, it's not as good, okay? Well, hold on, it's not as good. Okay, some people might say, well, object to object, are you sure? I just mean it doesn't make you feel the same way, and so I would try to get a Rolex, okay? You kind of seem like you're into Rolexes, and they just the X factor is just so much greater with the Rolex. So I would avoid Tudor unless you like the Tudor more. If you think, yeah, I can get it cheaper though, the Tudor, avoid. Okay, that's not a reason to get one because it's cost effective. That fades, okay? The way these watches make you feel doesn't, okay? And so I would go with a Rolex. Omega is fine. I just prefer Rolex. If you find an Omega that turns you on as much, sure. But I would say you got Rolex, and then I'd say Omega is below, and I'd say Tudor is a little bit below Rolex. And as far as object to object, no, they're all good, and you're not going to notice one is like better than the other. I'm talking about how they make you feel, the perception of other people and yourself, and that's what I'm talking about. And so I would stick to Rolex, and then on your 4th or 3rd piece, branch out a little bit. But having 2 Rolexes is perfect. And I think you nailed it right there. I think it's a GMT Master 2 that you want. What would I go for? It depends on what you like more. But I will say that if you want to go for a 5-digit, don't let, the fact that it's older sway you, because they wear wonderfully. In fact, they even wear, I would say, better than the 6 digits in terms of comfort level, okay? But as far as, timekeeping, and I'm not sure if it'll be able to like keep good time and stuff. Look, mine are super accurate. I have no problems with them. And I know if I were getting into watches and I didn't know, I think I would be scared of older models. I think, yeah, it's just not going to be as good. And what does that mean? Well, I mean, as good as in timekeeping? No, I mean, they're going to be pretty similar, all right? And obviously, the more modern pieces, you're going to have things like more resistance to magnetization, and people talk about the bracelets are more substantial. As far as comfort level, you might prefer the 5 digits, and you've got that 5-digit aesthetic, and you've got some of the more options about switching out the bezels and the bezel inserts and the bracelets. And so, I think you sound like you're into watches, you're reading about them, and you can make that decision yourself. But I think a GMT Master 2 would be the way I would go. You've got your blue parachrome spring in this Air King. I would say realistically, I would go for a 5-digit GMT Master 2 because you can get one. If I tell you you should get a ceramic GMT Master 2, it's like, what do? It's, you can't get one from an AD. And do I advocate paying the premium on those watches? No. I mean, I just do not think it's worth it, and I'll never do it myself. I could stomach a couple $100, but thousands, I couldn't do it. And so I would say pre-ceramic GMT Master 2 would be the way to go. And again, the rotating bezel just puts it that much above the Explorer 2. You're talking thousands of dollars difference, okay? Is it worth it? Yeah, it actually is. It actually is, all right? because this is a watch that's going to last you forever, and it's a little bit more iconic, and the functionality will be something you really do appreciate. So good luck, and hey, I don't know what the situation is in Germany, but if you do have your eye on a ceramic piece, drop by, put yourself on the list. I'm very jealous of places that have lists. We don't have lists here in Japan, all right? It's much more corrupt here in Japan. If I may go on a little mini rant here, you are either a whale, or they keep them in the back and lie to you and say they put them out, which is not the case. And there's no sort of list you can be put on. There's just really the only way to do it is to get them to like you, all right? Or buy a bunch of stuff, and then they'll, but it's the lies here. They say that they put them out, and they just don't do that, all right? So anyway, mini rant over. Thank you, Robin, for your custom video request. Good luck. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you need a watch with more functions, and you can't get much more function rich than a GMT Master 2. I think that's the piece you should go for. Fantastic piece, iconic, beautiful. Love those pre-ceramic GMTs. And I love the modern ones as well. But viewers, let Robin know what you think he should go for. Maybe you can come up with some better advice. Take care, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.